I dropped the heavy folder onto the bank manager's desk. I am here to foreclose on the property legally listed in my name. 3 years ago, my parents refused to pay $3,500 for my surgery, claiming a permanent limp would teach me humility. They thought my broke brother was my only savior in those 60 minutes. They had no idea I knew they were using my identity as a limitless credit card. Today, the bill comes due. My name is Riley Walker. I stood in the center of the executive office at the First National Bank of Charlotte, the kind of room that smelled of old money, lemon polish, and quiet desperation. The air conditioning hummed a low, monotonous note that seemed to vibrate against the glass walls. Outside, the city moved in a chaotic blur of traffic and pedestrians. But in here, time felt suspended. It was the sort of silence that usually precedes a verdict. Across from me sat Mr. Henderson, a man whose suit cost more than the car I drove for the last 3 years. He looked at the thick manila folder I had just dropped onto his mahogany desk. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed like a gunshot in the sterile room. It was not a polite sound. It was not the sound of a woman who had come to ask for a loan modification or to beg for an extension on a payment. It was the heavy, dull thud of consequences arriving at the door. I watched his eyes flicker from the folder to my face. He was trying to reconcile the woman standing before him with the file he likely had on his computer screen. I adjusted the cuff of my blazer. I was not the same person whose credit score had been demolished 3 years ago. I was no longer the desperate daughter crying into a phone receiver while my parents sipped champagne. I placed my hands on the back of the leather guest chair, gripping it tight enough to turn my knuckles white, though my face remained perfectly impassive. "I am here to claim what is rightfully mine," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor that used to plague me whenever I had to confront authority figures. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, reaching for the folder with a hesitant hand. "Miss Walker, these are significant allegations. The property in question is legally compromised." I finished for him, and the documents inside that folder prove exactly why. I am not here to negotiate. "Mr. Henderson, I am here to close the account." As he opened the file, revealing the stacks of notarized affidavits, forensic accounting reports, and the damning timeline of events, my mind drifted back. It did not go back to the hospital room immediately. It went back to a moment just before the fall, to the voice of my mother, Dana Walker. I could hear her tone as clearly as if she were standing next to the ficus plant in the corner of the office. It was a memory from the day after the accident, the first time she saw the extent of the damage to my leg. She had not cried. She had not asked the doctors about pain management. She had looked at my shattered ankle, her face twisting slightly as if she had smelled sour milk. "A slight limp will teach you humility." "Riley," she had said. She had spoken the words casually, smoothing the front of her silk blouse as she did so. It was not a statement of violence. My mother did not believe in violence. She believed in lessons. She believed that pain was a tool to correct behavior she found unappealing. In her eyes, my independence, my desire to build a career outside of the family shadow, and my refusal to marry the men she selected were all defects of character. A physical defect, therefore, was just the universe agreeing with her assessment. That sentence had haunted me for 1,095 days. A slight limp will teach you humility. They had the money. That is the part that keeps me awake at night when the phantom ache in my leg flares up during a rainstorm. It was not a matter of poverty. My parents, Gordon and Dana Walker, lived a life of curated excess. They drove European cars that required specific imported fuel. They vacationed in places where the water was bluer than the sky. They threw parties where the flower budget alone could have fed a family of 4 for a year. The surgery I needed to save my ability to walk normally cost $3,500. $3,500. That was the gap between a full recovery and a lifetime of chronic pain. That was the price tag they refused to pay. When the hospital administrator called them, explaining that my insurance had been flagged as inactive, a detail I would later learn was no accident, my father had told them he was liquidating assets for a larger investment and could not spare the cash. He told me, over the phone, that $3,500 was not a life or death matter. He told me to stop being dramatic. Then, he hung up the phone to sign a deposit check for a vintage watch he called a legacy piece. He bought a watch to pass down to a generation he refused to help stand up. Mr. Henderson turned a page in the folder, his eyebrows knitting together. I saw his finger trace the line where a signature sat. It was a signature that looked like mine. It had the loops and the slant of my handwriting. But I knew, and he was beginning to suspect, that the hand that held the pen did not belong to me. The irony of my family's betrayal was that they thought they were teaching me a lesson in finance. They told me I needed to learn the value of $1. They told me that if I wanted the surgery, I should have had a better savings account. They lectured me on responsibility while I lay in a hospital bed, watching the clock tick down the minutes until the surgeon would be forced to choose the cheaper, permanent option. But they did not know about Noah. They did not know about my brother. The disappointment, the artist, the one they had written off years ago as a lost cause. They did not know what Noah would do in those critical 60 minutes while I lay prepping for a surgery I could not afford. Noah, who barely had enough money to pay his rent. Noah, who ate instant noodles so he could buy high-quality paint. Noah, whom my mother called a waste of potential because he refused to wear a suit and sit in a cubicle. How does a man with less than $200 in his bank account come up with nearly $4,000 in less than an hour? That is a question that my parents never bothered to ask. They were too busy laughing at his frayed cuffs and his old truck. They assumed he had begged or borrowed it from a friend. They never imagined the sacrifice involved. They never imagined that the tools of his trade, the very things that gave his life meaning, were the currency he used to buy back my future. I watched Mr. Henderson's face pale as he reached the section of the report titled Credit Utilization and Unauthorized Guarantors. This is where the story truly begins. You see, most people think this is a story about a medical bill. They think it is a story about a tragic accident and a stingy family. If that were all it was, I might have eventually forgiven them. I might have chalked it up to their narcissism and moved on with my limp and my life. But 3 years ago, when I left that hospital, I made a discovery that turned my sadness into something much colder. It was not just that they refused to pay for my surgery. It was not just that they let me suffer. I discovered that the reason they claimed to be cash poor was that they were leveraging every dime they had, and every dime I did not have, to fund a lifestyle they could no longer afford. They were not just hoarding their money, they were using my name as a living, breathing credit card. The documents Mr. Henderson was reading right now proved it. While I was sedated, recovering from the trauma of the accident, papers were being signed, loans were being taken out, assets were being acquired in the name of Riley Walker. They bet on my failure. They bet that the daughter with the bad leg and the broken spirit would never have the energy or the resources to audit her own life. They bet that I would be so grateful for any scraps of affection they threw my way that I would never look at the fine print. They were wrong. I looked at the banker. The silence in the room had shifted. It was no longer the silence of authority judging a petitioner. It was the silence of a predator realizing it is actually the prey. Mr. Henderson looked up at me. Miss Walker, if these documents are authentic, this implies a level of fraud that involves family members. I leaned forward slightly. It involves criminals. Mr. Henderson, who they are related to is irrelevant to the law, and it is certainly irrelevant to me. I want you to ask yourself something as you read this. I want you to sit with this question. Just as I sat with it during those long months of physical therapy when every step felt like walking on broken glass, what would you do if your family bought a legacy with your future? What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you looked at your pain and saw a profit margin? Would you cry? I did. Would you beg? I did that too. Would you try to win them back? Convinced that if you just worked harder, if you were just better, they would finally love you enough to stop hurting you? I spent years doing exactly that. But there comes a moment when the tears dry up. There comes a moment when you look at the ledger of your life And you realize that the debt is not yours to pay. You realize that the love you were begging for was never there to begin with, and in that moment, you stop counting your wounds. You start counting their debts. If you have ever been the backup plan, the scapegoat, or the one they only call when they need something, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have ever felt like an option in a room full of priorities, then listen closely. Because this is not just my story, this is a blueprint. I am not writing this to tell you how I learned to walk again, though I did. I am not writing this to tell you how I built a business from nothing while my parents threw gala dinners on credit, though I did that too. I am writing this to tell you how I walked into this bank today to take back the very thing they valued more than their own daughter. Mr. Henderson closed the folder. His hands were trembling slightly. Miss Walker, what is it that you want us to do? I smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. It was the only thing my mother had given me that I still used. I want to foreclose. I said, I want to execute the lien I hold on the Walker estate. He looked at the clock on the wall. The foreclosure process is complex. It requires notification. It requires... Everything in that folder constitutes legal notification. I interrupted. My lawyer has already filed the writs. The reason I'm here personally, Mr. Henderson, is because I wanted to see the look on someone's face when they realized that the game was over, and because there is one specific clause in the mortgage agreement that my parents signed, a clause they thought they were signing with a silent partner. Not realizing that the partner was me, I stood up, smoothing my skirt. They called their wealth a legacy. They told the world they were building something that would last forever. They were right, in a way. They built a mountain of debt and deceit, and today, I am simply here to be the gravity that brings it all down. The next few hours are going to be very difficult for my parents. They are currently preparing for the Legacy Night Gala, the biggest social event of their season. They are putting on their best diamonds and their tailored tuxedos. They are preparing speeches about charity and family values. They have no idea that the ground beneath them has already been sold. They have no idea that the daughter they crippled to save $3,500 is about to cost them everything they own. So, if you are reading this, if you're listening to this, and you feel small, if you feel powerless, if you feel like the world has decided you are nothing more than a stepping stone for someone else's success, stay with me. Do not click away. Do not close the tab. Because by the end of this story, you will understand why the person they underestimated the most is the only one left standing. You will understand how a broken leg became the strongest thing about me. And you will see exactly what happens when you try to pay for a luxury lifestyle with a stolen name. My name is Riley Walker, and I am done being the victim. I turned to leave the office, the sound of my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. It is time to go to a party. The first thing I registered was not the light, nor the smell of antiseptic that usually defines a hospital room. It was the throbbing, rhythmic heat radiating from my lower right leg. It felt as though someone had replaced my bones with molten lead. I tried to shift, to alleviate the pressure, but a heavy weight anchored me to the bed. I opened my eyes. The ceiling tiles were stained with watermarks, forming shapes that looked like bruised continents. I was in a room at Riverview Regional Medical Center. I knew this place. It was the kind of hospital you went to when the ambulance refused to drive the extra 10 miles to the University Trauma Center. It was competent, but it was tired. The walls were a pale, exhausted shade of yellow. A man in a white coat stood at the foot of my bed, studying a clipboard with a frown that etched deep lines into his forehead. He looked up as I stirred. He introduced himself as Dr. Evans. He did not smile. He did not offer the platitudes that doctors on television usually dispense. He got straight to the point, his voice dry and professional. Miss Walker, you have a comminuted fracture of the distal tibia and fibula, he said. To put it simply, your ankle is shattered. The bone didn't just break, it fragmented. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like it was coated in sandpaper. I swallowed hard and managed a whisper. How bad is it? Dr. Evans tapped the clipboard. It is bad enough that we are on a clock. We have two options. and we need to decide within the hour before the swelling compromises our ability to operate. He held up one finger. Option 1 is an open reduction and internal fixation. We go in. We use titanium plates and screws to reconstruct the joint surface. If we do this, and if you commit to the physical therapy, there is a 90% chance you will walk normally again. You could run again. He held up a second finger. Option 2 is non-surgical management. We cast it as it sits. The bones will heal, but they will not align perfectly. You will lose significant range of motion. You will develop early-onset arthritis. And, to be completely honest with you, you will walk with a pronounced limp for the rest of your life. The choice seemed absurd. It was not a choice at all. Who would choose to be crippled? Option 1. I said immediately, do the surgery. Dr. Evans nodded, but his expression did not clear. He looked toward the door where a nurse was hovering, clutching a tablet against her chest like a shield. We want to do the surgery. Miss Walker, he said, but we have hit a snag with admissions. The nurse stepped forward. Her name tag read, Brenda. She looked apologetic, her eyes kind but tired. Miss Walker, I just ran your insurance card. The system is showing that your coverage was terminated 21 days ago. I stared at her. That is impossible. I am on my parents' family plan. I pay them my share every month. It is auto-drafted from my account to theirs. Brenda shook her head slowly. I called the provider directly. The primary policyholder removed you from the plan effective the 1st of the month. You are listed as uninsured. The room seemed to tilt. The throbbing in my leg faded into a dull background noise, replaced by the sharp, high-pitched ringing of panic in my ears. Removed? Without a phone call? Without an email? How much? I asked, my voice trembling. How much for the surgery without insurance? Brenda looked at the floor, then back at me. The deposit required to book the operating room and the anesthesiologist for an uninsured patient is $3,500. That is just the upfront cost. The total bill will be much higher. But we need the $3,500 to wheel you into surgery. $3,500. It was not a fortune. In the grand scheme of the world, it was a used car. It was a nice vacation. It was a designer handbag. But as I reached for my phone on the bedside table, checking my banking app with shaking fingers, I knew it might as well have been $3 million. My checking account balance stared back at me in bright, mocking green numbers, $42.15, just 48 hours ago. There had been $5,000 in there. I had saved for 2 years, scraping together every tip and every overtime hour from my catering job. And just yesterday morning, I had signed a lease and paid the security deposit for a small, run-down commercial kitchen space on the edge of town. It was my dream. I was going to launch my own meal prep service. I had bet on myself. I had bet everything on myself. Assuming that my safety net, my family, my insurance, was solid, I looked at Dr. Evans. I need to make a phone call. He nodded, glancing at his watch. You have about 40 minutes before the orthopedic surgeon leaves for another hospital. Please, hurry. I dialed my father's number. My thumb hovered over the contact labeled Dad Gordon for a second. Trembling, I did not want to make this call. I was 34 years old. I was supposed to be independent. But desperation has a way of stripping away your dignity layer by layer. The phone rang 4 times. Then, it connected. The first thing I heard was not his voice. It was jazz music. Smooth, expensive saxophone notes floating over the chatter of a crowd and the distinct clink of crystal glasses toasting. Gordon? I said. Dad? Riley? His voice boomed, loud and jovial. He was shouting over the noise. Hold on. Hold on. Let me step out to the patio. I heard the sound of a sliding glass door, and the noise of the party muffled slightly, though the laughter was still audible in the background. Everything okay, kiddo? We are just in the middle of a toast. The new vintage just arrived. Dad, I'm in the hospital. I said. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. I was in an accident. My leg, it's bad. There was a pause. Then, the sound of ice rattling in a glass. An accident? Are you okay? You sound okay. I need surgery. Dad, right now, if I don't get it, I'm going to be permanently disabled, but the hospital says my insurance is gone. They said I was removed from the policy. I heard a sigh on the other end. It was not a sigh of worry. It was the sigh of a man whose golf game has been interrupted by rain. Then, I heard my mother's voice. She must have been standing right next to him. Put her on speaker. Gordon, Dana Walker said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the static. I heard the click of the speakerphone. Mom, I said. Mom, they cut my insurance. I don't understand. I sent you the check for my share this month. Riley, honestly. My mother's voice dripped with irritation. You always have to make everything such a production. Remember when you fell off the swing set in 3rd grade? You screamed for an hour and it was just a bruise. Are you sure you aren't overreacting? I am looking at my bones sticking out of my skin. Mom! I shouted, the pain finally breaking through my shock. The doctor is standing right here. I need $3,500 for the deposit or they won't operate. Why was I taken off the insurance? There was a silence on the line, but it was not an empty silence. It was the silence of two people exchanging a look. We had to make some adjustments to the family portfolio, my father said, his voice dropping the jovial tone. The premiums were going up. We did an audit of our monthly expenses. You cut my health insurance to save on premiums? I asked, disbelief making me lightheaded. It wasn't just the premiums. Riley, my mother interjected. Sloan needed the capital. Sloan, my younger sister, the golden child, the former beauty queen who was currently trying to launch a career as a lifestyle influencer. What? I whispered. Sloan has a very important opportunity, Dana explained, speaking slowly as if to a slow child. She was invited to join the Alpha Tier Influence Circle. It is a networking group in Los Angeles. It is essential for her brand. The membership fee and the retainer for her image consultant were substantial. We had to free up cash flow to cover the initial outlay. I felt the bile rise in my throat. You canceled my health insurance to pay for Sloan's image consultant? It is an investment. Riley, my father said defensively, Sloan's career is taking off. She needs support. We figured you are young. You are healthy. You haven't been to the doctor in 2 years. We thought we could drop you for a few months and pick it back up later. It was a calculated risk. Well, the risk failed, I screamed, gripping the bedsheet. I am in the hospital now. I need the money now. Please, Dad, just wire me the $3,500. I will pay you back. I swear. I can't walk with a cane for the rest of my life. I'm a chef. I need my legs. There was another clink of ice. Then, a throat clearing. We don't have it liquid. Riley, my father said, what do you mean you don't have it? I could hear the party behind them. I knew what kind of scotch they were drinking. I knew the cost of the caterer they likely hired. I just put a deposit down on the Lake Como timeshare, he said. My heart stopped. The Lake Como timeshare. He had been talking about it for years. Not a house. A fractional ownership in a villa where they could go for 2 weeks a year to pretend they were royalty. You bought a timeshare? I asked, my voice hollow. It is not a timeshare. It is a legacy property, he corrected, sounding offended. It is something to pass down. It is for the family. I am family, I cried out. I am your daughter. I am lying here broken and you are telling me you spent the money on a 2-week vacation spot? Stop being so dramatic. Riley, my mother snapped. It is unbecoming. You are 34 years old. We cannot be your personal piggy bank forever. We raised you to be independent. You took my money, I said. Tears finally spilling over. I paid you for that insurance, and we used it to support your sister because she actually has a chance to make something of herself. Dana said, her words were like precision strikes. Look, we are in the middle of hosting the neighbors. We cannot deal with your hysteria right now. Dad? I pleaded. One last time. I lowered my voice. I begged. Please, I am scared. It hurts. Just help me this one time. I heard him hesitate. For a second. I thought the father who used to carry me on his shoulders might push through the man who cared more about his country club status. Then, he spoke. "You are a grown woman. Riley, you should have had an emergency fund. This is a hard lesson, but maybe it is one you need. Figure it out." The line went dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at the screen. The call had lasted 3 minutes and 14 seconds. That was the time it took for my parents to decide that my ability to walk was worth less than a networking fee for my sister and a villa in Italy. Dr. Evans stepped back toward the bed. He looked at my face, and I knew he saw the answer there. "They are not coming, are they?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No, they are not coming." He let out a long breath. "Okay, we have to be realistic. Miss Walker, do you have anyone else? A spouse? A partner?" I shook my head again. I was single. My last relationship had ended because he said I worked too much and earned too little. "Siblings?" he asked. I laughed. A harsh, broken sound. "My sister is the reason I have no insurance. And my brother." I thought of Noah. Noah, who lived in a studio apartment above a garage in the worst part of town. Noah, who drove a truck that started only 60% of the time. Noah, who was currently estranged from our parents because he refused to go to law school and chose to be a carpenter instead. "My brother is broke," I said. "He is a carpenter. He lives paycheck to paycheck. He doesn't have $3,000. He probably doesn't have 300. "Then we have to make a decision," Dr. Evans said gently. "The swelling is getting worse. If we don't prep you for surgery in the next 20 minutes, the window closes. If you cannot produce the funds—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I looked down at my leg. I imagined walking down the aisle of a grocery store, dragging my foot. I imagined standing in a kitchen, trying to chop vegetables while leaning all my weight on one side, the pain gnawing at me hour after hour. I imagined the look on my mother's face the next time she saw me, that look of pity mixed with disgust, the "I told you so," without saying the words. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was heavier than the cast they were about to put on me. It was the weight of absolute abandonment. I looked at the nurse. Brenda looked like she wanted to cry for me. I picked up my phone again. I had one contact left. I knew it was futile. Calling him would only make him feel guilty for not being able to help. It was cruel to even ask him, but I was terrified. I dialed Noah. He answered on the first ring. "Ree?" His voice was rough, breathless. He sounded like he was working. I could hear the whine of a table saw in the background. "What's wrong? You never call in the middle of the day." "Noah," I whispered. I messed up. I'm at Riverview. My leg is broken." The saw stopped instantly. "I'm coming," he said. "Noah, wait," I said, trying to stop him before he wasted his gas. "It's not just the leg. Mom and Dad, they cut my insurance. The hospital needs $3,500 right now, or they won't fix it properly. I'm going to be crippled. Noah, and I don't have the money." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. "Where are Mom and Dad?" he asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. "They are at a party," I said, a sob escaping. They said no. I heard a sound I had never heard from my brother before. It was a low, guttural noise, like something breaking deep inside his chest. "Don't let them put the cast on," he said. "Noah, you don't have—" "Give me an hour," he interrupted. "Just stall them. Tell the doctor to wait 1 hour. Noah, promise me. Riley," he shouted, and the intensity of it made me flinch. "Promise me you won't let them touch you until I get there." "I promise," I whispered. The line clicked off. I lowered the phone. I looked at Dr. Evans. "My brother says he's coming," I said, though I didn't believe it would make a difference. He asked for an hour. Dr. Evans looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12. "I can give you 45 minutes. Miss Walker," he said. "After that, I have another patient on the table. If the funds aren't here by then, we have to proceed with the non-surgical option." I nodded and leaned my head back against the pillow. I closed my eyes. I tried to picture Noah. I tried to imagine what he could possibly do in 45 minutes to conjure up thousands of dollars. I pictured him looking around his dusty workshop, his eyes scanning the stacks of wood and the old tools. I knew he loved me. But love is not currency. Love does not pay anesthesiologists. Love does not buy titanium screws. As the minutes ticked by, watching the clock hand slice away my future 1 second at a time, I realized something. My parents were right about one thing. This was a lesson. But it wasn't a lesson in humility. It was a lesson in value. I learned exactly what I was worth to Gordon and Dana Walker. I was worth less than a deposit on a vacation home. I was worth less than my sister's vanity. And as the pain in my leg grew from a throb to a scream, I decided that if I ever got off this bed, if I ever walked again, I would spend the rest of my life ensuring that the balance of that equation changed. 30 minutes passed. The door stayed closed. Brenda came in and checked my vitals. She didn't say anything about the money. She just adjusted my pillow and gave me a sad smile. 40 minutes. Dr. Evans returned. He was wearing surgical scrubs now, but not for me. He held a consent form in his hand. "It is time. Miss Walker," he said softly. "I am sorry. We have to cast it." I felt a tear slide hot and fast down my temple into my hair. "Okay," I whispered. He handed me the pen. I brought it to the paper. The tip of the pen touched the line where I was supposed to sign away my ability to run. And then, the door to the hallway slammed open. The door to my hospital room did not just open, it struck the stopper on the wall with a violence that made the plastic casing crack. Noah stood in the frame. My brother looked like he had run every mile from his workshop to the hospital. His chest was heaving. His flannel shirt was dark with sweat down the back. And there was fine sawdust clinging to his eyebrows and the stubble on his jaw. He looked wild, terrified, and dangerously angry. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Dr. Evans, who had pulled the pen back from the paper as if it were hot. "Stop," Noah wheezed, stepping into the room. "Do not let her sign that." "Sir, you cannot just barge in here," Dr. Evans began. Stepping between me and the door, "We are on a critical timeline. If we do not proceed with the casting now—" "I said stop!" Noah roared. His voice cracked, a sound of sheer desperation that silenced the room. He took a breath, trying to steady himself, and looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Do not do it. Do not let them cripple you." "I have to." "Noah," I whispered. The tears finally spilling over, Mom and Dad said no. "I have $42. I cannot pay the deposit." Noah ignored me. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He hit a button and held it up. Jamming his thumb onto the speaker icon, I knew who he was calling. It was the only move he had left. The line rang once, then twice. "What is it now?" Dana Walker's voice filled the small room. The background noise of the party was louder than before, a wash of laughter and jazz that sounded obscene against the sterile silence of the hospital. "Mom, listen to me," Noah said, his voice low and trembling. "I am at the hospital. Riley is about to sign a consent form that will leave her with a permanent disability. She needs $3,500, right now, not tomorrow, not next week, right now." "Oh, well, for heaven's sake," Dana sighed. "We already discussed this with her. Why are you getting involved?" "Noah? Did she call you crying? She knows you are the soft touch. She is your daughter," Noah shouted. He was gripping the phone so tight his knuckles were white. "This is not a game. Her leg is shattered. If she does not get this surgery, she will never walk right again. Do you understand? She loses her career. She loses her life. Just wire the money. I will pay you back. I will work every weekend for the rest of my life if I have to. Just send it." There was a pause on the line. For a second, I thought maybe he had reached her. Maybe the sheer panic in his voice had pierced the bubble of champagne and self-importance she lived in. Then, she laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Noah, honey, you can barely pay your own rent," she said. Her tone was patronizing. like she was explaining quantum physics to a toddler. You need to focus on your little carpentry business and stop trying to be the hero. It is embarrassing. Riley needs to learn consequences. If you had a real job instead of playing with wood scraps, maybe you could help her. But you don't. So stop ruining our evening with this melodrama. Click. The silence that followed was heavier than the cast they wanted to put on my leg. It was a physical weight. Noah stared at the phone screen, which had gone dark. He did not scream. He did not throw the phone against the wall. He just stood there, completely still. I saw something change in his face. It was subtle, but terrifying. The desperation vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow look. It was the look of a door slamming shut in a house that would never be opened again. He had gone to the well one last time, and found it not just dry, but poisoned. "Noah," I said softly, "it is okay. Let me sign. It is over." He looked up at me. The softness was gone from his eyes. "No," he said. He turned to the doctor. "How much time do I have?" "Exactly." Dr. Evans looked at the clock. "The surgeon leaves the building in 60 minutes. I need 20 minutes to prep her. You have 40 minutes to get the funds into the hospital account. If you are 1 minute late, the OR team goes home." Noah nodded once. "Keep her prepped. Do not let her sign that form." "Noah, where are you going?" I cried out as he spun on his heel. "You do not have that kind of money." "I will be back," he said. And then he was gone. The next 45 minutes were the longest of my life. The pain in my leg had become a living thing, a creature with teeth that gnawed at my shin bone with every heartbeat. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the terror of hope. Hope is cruel. It makes you wait. It makes you imagine a salvation that logic tells you is impossible. I knew Noah's finances. I knew he had been saving for 6 months just to buy a new transmission for his truck. I knew he ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 times a week. There was no secret stash. There was no rich friend. 30 minutes passed. Brenda came in to check my blood pressure. It was through the roof. 40 minutes. Dr. Evans walked in. He looked sympathetic, but firm. "Miss Walker." "I am sorry," he said, picking up the clipboard again. "We are out of time. We cannot hold the room any longer. We have to cast it." I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and salty. I felt defeated. I felt small. "Wait." The shout came from the hallway. We both turned. Noah burst through the door again. He looked worse than before. His face was pale, drained of color, and his hands were covered in grease and grime. He was clutching a thick, messy stack of cash in both hands. He didn't say a word. He walked straight to the billing coordinator who had followed him in, and he slammed the money down on the rolling table. "Count it," he gasped, bracing his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. The coordinator looked startled. She reached out and picked up the bills. It was a chaotic mix. Hundreds, 50s, even a stack of 20s held together with a rubber band. It smelled like oil and stale tobacco and desperation. She counted it quickly, her fingers flipping through the notes. The room was silent except for the snapping of the bills and Noah's ragged breathing. $3,800, she announced, looking up with wide eyes. "It covers the deposit and the initial anesthesia fee." Dr. Evans looked at Noah, then at me. He nodded. "Get her to the OR, now." The nurses sprang into action. They unlocked the wheels of my bed. They began hooking up IV lines. The sudden flurry of motion was dizzying, but I couldn't look at them. I could only look at my brother. He was leaning against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. He looked utterly depleted. "Noah," I whispered as they started to push the bed toward the door. "Noah, look at me." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, and he looked like he had aged 10 years in 1 hour. "Where did you get $3,800 in 40 minutes?" I asked. The dread was pooling in my stomach, colder than the ice pack on my leg. He didn't answer. He looked away. "Noah!" I shouted, trying to sit up despite the pain. He sighed, a long, shuddering breath. "I sold the shop," he said. My heart stopped. "Not the building. He rented the space. He meant the tools. You You sold your tools? I stammered. The Festool saw? The Lie-Nielsen planes? The custom lathe you spent 5 years saving for? He nodded. I took them to that pawn shop on 4th Street. The guy has been trying to buy my lathe for months. I told him he could have everything in the truck if he gave me cash on the spot. He lowballed me. But he had the cash. I stared at him in horror. Those tools were not just objects. They were his life. They were his career. He was a master craftsman. Without them, he was just a guy with rough hands. He had just sold his ability to make a living. He had gutted his own future to save mine. Noah, no, I sobbed. You can't work without them. You just destroyed your business. He stood up slowly, walking over to the side of the bed as the nurses tried to wheel me out. He reached out and took my hand. His palm was rough, calloused, and warm. Tools can be replaced. He said, his voice steady for the first time. You can't. He squeezed my hand. I can buy another saw. I can't buy another sister. They pulled the bed away. I watched him as I rolled down the hallway. He stood in the doorway of the hospital room, a solitary figure in a flannel shirt, framed by the sterile yellow light. He had nothing left. His pockets were empty. His truck was empty. But he stood tall. I was rolled into the operating room. The bright lights overhead were blinding. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face. Count backward from 10. She said, 10. I thought of my parents, clinking glasses, toasting to their legacy. 9. I thought of the watch my father bought. I thought of the networking group my sister joined. 8. I thought of Noah's empty workshop. I thought of the silence on the other end of the phone when my mother laughed. 7. The darkness began to creep in at the edges of my vision. But it wasn't the darkness of sleep. It was the darkness of a storm gathering. They called their money a legacy. They called their reputation a legacy. They thought legacy was something you bought, something you put your name on, something you hoarded. 6. I saw Noah's face again. I saw the sacrifice he had made without hesitation. He had burned his own world down to keep me warm. That was a legacy. 5. And as the drugs pulled me under, I made a vow. It was not a scream. It was not a threat. It was a cold, hard fact, forged in the fire of my broken bone and my brother's empty hands. I was going to heal. I was going to walk. And when I was strong enough, I was going to take their version of legacy and tear it apart, brick by brick. 4. I would show them what family really meant, and I would make sure that the next time Noah Walker walked into a room, he would own it. 3. They refused to pay $3,500. 2. It was going to cost them everything. 1. The world went black. When I woke up, the room was dim. The heavy, rhythmic beeping of a monitor was the only sound. My leg was elevated, wrapped in thick layers of gauze and a rigid brace, but the crushing, grinding pain was gone, replaced by a dull, manageable ache. Dr. Evans was standing at the foot of the bed, reviewing a chart. He saw my eyes flutter open. "Welcome back, Miss Walker," he said. His voice was tired but pleased. "The surgery went perfectly. The bone is set. The hardware is in place. Will I walk?" I croaked. My mouth tasted like cotton. He nodded. "You have a long road ahead. Physical therapy will be brutal. But yes, you will walk. You will not have a limp. You are going to be whole." I turned my head to the side. Noah was sitting in the visitor's chair in the corner. He had fallen asleep. His head was tipped back against the wall, his mouth slightly open. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had lost a war but saved the kingdom. I watched the rise and fall of his chest. I thought about the empty truck parked outside. I thought about the jobs he would have to cancel tomorrow because he had no tools to do them. I reached out and touched the cold metal rail of the hospital bed. Let them have their party. I thought, let them drink their champagne. Let them think they got away with it. The bill is coming, and I am going to be the one to collect it. The winter that followed my surgery was the longest season of my life. It was a season defined not by the temperature outside, but by the creeping, damp cold of the apartment Noah and I shared. 6 months had passed since the day my brother sold his livelihood to save my leg. In that half year, The world I knew had shrunk down to the four walls of a basement unit in a complex where the hallways always smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. We moved there because it was cheap. We moved there because, after the medical bills that my family refused to cover, and the cost of the aggressive physical therapy I needed to ensure the surgery wasn't wasted, we had nothing left. I sat at the small, laminate table that served as our dining area, desk, and storage space. My leg was out of the cast now, encased in a heavy walking boot that I was supposed to wear for another 4 weeks. The scars on my ankle were angry pink lines, a roadmap of the trauma that had reshaped our lives, but the pain in the bone was nothing compared to the ache in my chest when I looked at Noah. He was asleep on the lumpy sofa we had salvaged from the curb. It was only 6 p.m, but he had passed out the moment he walked through the door. His flannel shirt was stained with drywall dust and gray primer. His hands, the hands of an artist who used to craft dovetail joints with the precision of a surgeon, were raw and blistered. He was not building furniture anymore. He was hauling sheetrock and mixing concrete for a general contractor who paid him in cash and treated him like a mule. I watched his chest rise and fall. He looked thinner, the spark in his eyes, the one that used to light up when he talked about wood grain or a new design, had dimmed. He was exhausted. He was working 12-hour days doing back-breaking labor just to keep the lights on and pay for my rehab sessions. He never complained, not once, but every time he winced while opening a jar because his hands were too sore, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I had tried to go back to work. 2 weeks ago, I had put on my chef's whites, determined to reclaim my spot in the kitchen where I had been a sous chef. I thought if I could just stand, I could cook. I was wrong. The memory of that shift still burned. A commercial kitchen is a dance. It is a high-speed, high-pressure ballet of sharp knives, hot pans, and constant movement. You pivot, you lunge. You carry 20-pound stock pots across slick floors. I lasted 3 hours. I was too slow on the line. My ankle throbbed with a sickening rhythm every time I put weight on it to turn. When the dinner rush hit, I became a bottleneck. Orders piled up. I tried to rush, to push through the pain, and my leg gave out. I didn't fall, but I stumbled, knocking a tray of prepped scallops onto the floor, $200 of product, gone in a second. The executive chef, a man I had respected for years, didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he pulled me into his office at the end of the shift. He looked at me with pity. "I cannot have you on the line. Riley," he had said, his voice soft. "You are a liability. If you fall and hurt yourself again, the insurance will kill me, and frankly, you are moving at half speed. I am sorry." He handed me a check for the 3 hours and told me not to come back. Being fired for incompetence is one thing. Being fired because your body is broken is a different kind of humiliation. It tells you that you are obsolete. It tells you that your value is tied to your physical utility. And right now, that utility is zero. So, I sat in the dark apartment, counting the crumpled bills Noah had left on the table. We had $40 to last until Friday. Then, there was a knock at the door. It was not the tentative knock of a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. It was a confident, demanding rap. 3 sharp strikes. Noah stirred on the couch, groaning as he sat up. "Who is that?" "I don't know," I said, grabbing my cane to leverage myself up. I opened the door. The hallway was dim, but the group standing there seemed to suck all the air out of the space. My father, Gordon, stood in front, wearing a camel hair coat that probably cost more than our entire year's rent. My mother, Dana, was beside him, holding a handkerchief to her nose as if the very air of our building was toxic. Behind them stood my sister, Sloane, and her husband, Grant. For a moment, I just stared at them. I had not seen them since the phone call in the hospital. I had not heard from them. No cards, no texts, just silence. "Well, are you going to let us in?" Gordon asked, his voice booming as if he were greeting a client at the country club. "We were in the neighborhood. I didn't move." "Why are you here?" "We came to see how you are doing," Dana said, pushing past me before I could stop her. She stepped into the apartment, her heels clicking on the cheap linoleum. She looked around, her eyes widening in undisguised horror. "Oh, Riley, this is quaint." They filed in, one by one. The apartment was suddenly crowded. The smell of their expensive perfume and cologne battled with the scent of Noah's work clothes and our stale coffee. Noah stood up. He didn't offer a greeting. He just crossed his arms, leaning against the wall, his face a mask of stone. Gordon clapped his hands together. "So, we were just leaving a consultation with the architect for the new sunroom and thought we would swing by. It has been a while." 6 months. I said, "It has been 6 months. Has it?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Time flies. Anyway, we wanted to make sure you were getting on your feet. Literally." He laughed at his own joke. No one else did. Sloane was looking at my walking boot. "It looks heavy," she said. "Does it hurt?" "It hurts less than being abandoned," I said. Grant chuckled. He was a tall man with a jawline that looked like it had been bought from a catalog and a personality to match. He worked in venture capital, or hedge funds, or some other industry that involved moving money around without actually making anything. "Come on, Riley. Don't be bitter," Grant said, leaning against our small kitchenette counter. "It is unattractive. You know, mindset is everything. If you dwell on the negative, you manifest poverty." He gestured around the room. Case in point. I looked at him. "I manifested poverty?" I asked. "Or did my family steal my safety net to buy a timeshare?" "It is a legacy property," Gordon corrected automatically. "And speaking of which, you should see the plans. We are adding a wine cellar." He pulled out his phone, eager to show me photos of a hole in the ground that cost more than my surgery. Dana, meanwhile, was running a finger along the top of our television. She inspected the dust on her fingertip with a frown. "Riley, this place is a mess," she said. "I understand you are injured, but that is no excuse for squalor. If you cannot keep a clean house, how do you expect to get your life back in order? It is all connected. A messy room equals a messy mind." She looked at Noah. "And you? Look at you. You look like a day laborer. Is this really the best you can do?" "I am a day laborer." "Mom," Noah said, his voice flat, "because I sold my tools to pay for Riley's leg. Remember?" "Oh, stop playing the martyr," she snapped. "You could have found another way." "You always have to make it dramatic." Sloane chimed in then. She was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "You know, Riley, since you are obviously not working, I might have something for you." I looked at her. "What?" "Well, my housekeeper is going on maternity leave," she said. "It is hard to find good help these days. I need someone to come by twice a week, mostly just laundry and organizing the pantry. Maybe walking the dogs. I could pay you. It would be under the table, so you do not have to worry about taxes." She looked up and smiled. A bright, vapid smile. "It would help you out. And honestly, with that leg, it is not like you are going to be running a marathon or working a high-end service job anytime soon. You should take what you can get. Know your position." The room went silent. I looked at Sloane. I looked at her perfect hair, her expensive handbag, her complete and utter lack of empathy. She was offering me a job as her maid. She was offering to pay me scraps to clean the toilets in a house bought with money that should have protected us. Then Grant spoke up again. He was looking at me with a smirk, his eyes traveling down to my boot and back up to my face. "She is right. Riley, you have to be realistic. You are, what, 34? And now you have a permanent defect. The dating market is brutal. Men want someone active, someone who can keep up. You are going to have a hard time finding someone to take care of you with that limp. You might as well make yourself useful to the family. It is probably the only way you will stay relevant." The insult hung in the air. It was precise. It was calculated. It wasn't just about money. It was about my worth as a human being. He was telling me I was damaged goods, unlovable, broken. I felt a heat rise in my chest. It wasn't the hot, tearful anger of the hospital. It was something else. It was cold. It was ice. It was the feeling of a glacier calving, a massive shift that changes the landscape forever. I looked at Gordon. who was still trying to load a picture of his wine cellar. I looked at Dana, who was wiping her hands on a sanitizer wipe she had pulled from her purse. I looked at Noah. He had pushed himself off the wall. His fists were clenched at his sides. He looked ready to fight. He looked ready to tear Grant apart. I put a hand on Noah's arm. I felt his muscles trembling with rage. "No," I said softly to him. Then I turned to my parents. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not ask them how they could be so cruel. I realized in that moment that asking them to understand was like asking a shark to understand poetry. They were incapable of it. "Get out," I said. Gordon looked up from his phone. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house," I repeated. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of any emotion. Dana gasped. "Riley, we just got here. We are trying to help." "You are not helping," I said. "You are inspecting the wreckage. You came here to feel better about yourselves. You came here to look at the losers and reassure yourselves that you are the winners. Well, you have seen us. Now leave. Riley, you are being hysterical again," Grant said, rolling his eyes. I took a step toward him. I did not limp. I slammed the boot down hard. "I am not hysterical. Grant, I am clear. For the first time in my life, I am perfectly clear. Get out." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see his little girl. He saw a stranger. "Come on, Gordon," Dana said, sniffing loudly. "If she wants to rot in this hole, let her. We have dinner reservations at 8 anyway. We shouldn't have wasted our time." She turned and marched out the door. Sloane followed, shooting me a look of pitying disgust. Grant lingered for a second. "Good luck, Riley. You are going to need it." He walked out. Gordon was the last to leave. He looked at me, then at Noah. He opened his mouth as if to say something fatherly, something to smooth it over, but the look in my eyes stopped him. He closed his mouth, turned, and closed the door behind him. The silence rushed back in. Noah let out a long breath. He slumped back against the wall. "I thought you were going to hit him," he said quietly. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the wood grain. Hitting him would be too easy. I said, "It would heal." I turned to Noah. My heart was pounding, but my mind was razor sharp. Grant is right about one thing. I said. Noah looked at me, confused. "What? That you are damaged?" "No," I said, "that I need to be realistic." I walked over to the table and picked up the pile of bills. "They think this is the end of the story. Noah, they think we are down here in the mud, and they are up there in the clouds. They think they can come down here, kick dirt in our faces, and walk away laughing." I looked at my brother. I saw the exhaustion in his face, the sacrifice etched into his skin. "They made a mistake today." I said. "What mistake?" Noah asked. "They showed me exactly who they are," I replied, "and they showed me exactly what they fear. Did you see Dad's face when I told him to leave? He wasn't angry. He was confused. He is used to compliance. He is used to controlling the narrative." I looked down at my boot. "They want me to be a maid? They want me to be a charity case?" I looked back at Noah. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. "I am not going to clean their pantry. Noah, I am going to own it." Noah stared at me. He had seen me angry before. He had seen me sad. But he had never seen me like this. He saw the shift. He saw the moment the sister he protected became a partner who was ready to go to war. He straightened up. A small, tired smile touched his lips. "Okay," he said. "So, what is the plan?" "First," I said, "we stop acting like victims. We stop waiting for an apology that is never coming." I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. I saw the taillights of my father's car disappearing into the night. "They think I am a bad investment," I whispered. I turned back to the room, the shabby, cold, empty room. I am going to show them that I am the most dangerous transaction they ever made. 3 weeks after my family inspected my poverty like tourists at a zoo. My phone rang. The screen displayed a picture of my mother, Dana, from 10 years ago. A photo where she was actually smiling at me, I had forgotten to change it. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Noah was at work, grinding concrete floors for $12 an hour. I was sitting at our small table, filling out job applications for call centers because my legs were no longer considered an asset in a kitchen. I answered, "Riley, we have a situation," Dana said without preamble. There was no hello. There was no apology for the scene at my apartment. There was only the brisk, entitled tone of a woman who needed a problem solved. The catering service for Sloan's brand launch tonight just tried to double their quote. Extortionists. We fired them. I waited. I knew what was coming. We need hands. Riley, we have the food, but we need someone to plate it and keep the champagne flutes cycling. You have catering experience. You know how to make a tray look presentable. You want me to work at Sloan's party? I asked. The question felt heavy in my mouth. It is family. Riley, she snapped. And honestly, it is not like you have a full schedule. We will pay you the standard rate. Consider it a favor. We are in a bind. I should have said no. Every rational neuron in my brain fired a warning shot. I should have told her to hire a staffing agency. I should have hung up. But there is a treacherous part of the human heart that never quite grows up. It is the part of me that was 6 years old, desperate for her to look at a drawing I made. It is the part that thought, maybe if I help them when they are desperate, they will see me. They will see that I am useful. They will see that I am good. And there was a darker, colder reason. I wanted to see them. I wanted to be close to the machinery of their lives. I wanted to see exactly what they were building while my life was paused. I will be there. I said, "Good," Dana said. "The event is at the Lakeside Club in Charlotte. Be there by 4. And Riley? Wear black." The Lakeside Club was a monument to old money and new debt. It sat on the edge of the water, a sprawling structure of white columns and manicured lawns. I drove Noah's truck, the engine sputtering as I pulled up to the service entrance. I walked toward the side door, leaning heavily on my cane. My boot clunked against the pavement. Dana was waiting for me. She was wearing a dress that shimmered like liquid silver. She looked me up and down, her eyes stopping on the thick, gray medical boot encasing my lower leg. She sighed, a long, disappointed exhale. "I thought you would be out of that thing by now," she said. "It has been 6 months. Mom, it takes a year to heal fully." "Well, it is an eyesore," she declared. She reached into a tote bag and pulled out a black apron and a stiff, oversized black button-down shirt. "Here, put these on. And Riley, please stay behind the high-top tables or in the prep area. We are trying to project an image of effortless perfection. A medical boot does not fit the aesthetic." I took the uniform. The fabric was cheap polyester. It felt rough against my fingers. I changed in a cramped employee restroom. When I came out, I was no longer Riley Walker, the daughter. I was the help. The next 4 hours were a blur of physical agony. The prep kitchen was a narrow hallway behind the main ballroom, filled with the heat of warming ovens and the smell of expensive cheese. My job was to assemble hors d'oeuvres, tiny, intricate crackers topped with smoked salmon and dill. I stood. That was the torture. I stood on the hard tile floor, shifting my weight to my good leg until my hips screamed, then shifting back to the bad leg until the metal plates in my ankle felt like they were glowing hot. Through the swinging doors, I could hear the party. I heard the clinking of glasses. I heard the polite, hollow laughter of Charlotte's elite. Every 30 minutes, I had to walk out onto the floor to replenish the buffet. I kept my head down. I moved quickly, trying to minimize the limp, trying to hide the boot behind the long tablecloths. I saw them. I saw Gordon holding court near the bar, a scotch in his hand, laughing loudly at a joke I was sure wasn't funny. I saw Grant, slick and predatory, shaking hands with men in suits, probably pitching them some investment scheme. And I saw Sloan. She was the center of the universe tonight. She wore a white gown that looked like a wedding dress, minus the veil. She was glowing. She held a microphone, talking about her journey, her brand, her authenticity. I stood in the shadows near a pillar, holding a tray of empty glasses. I watched her. She was talking about sacrifice. She was talking about how hard she worked to build her platform. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. Sacrifice? Her sacrifice was my surgery. Her platform was built on the foundation of my broken bones. Just then, Sloane's eyes caught mine. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just stared at me for a second, her eyes flat. Then she turned back to her audience, beaming. An hour later, the room was packed. The air was thick with perfume and body heat. My leg was throbbing so hard it affected my vision. I was sweating in the polyester shirt. Dana found me in the kitchen. "Riley, the VIP section needs more champagne," she ordered. "The servers are busy. Run 2 bottles out to the table near the window. I can't carry a heavy tray and use my cane." "Mom," I said through gritted teeth. "Then leave the cane," she hissed. "It is 10 feet. Just don't limp. It is distracting." I left the cane. I grabbed the silver tray with 2 chilled bottles and 6 crystal flutes. I took a deep breath. I pushed through the swinging doors. The walk was agony. Every step sent a jolt of electricity up my spine. But I kept my face smooth. I was invisible. I was furniture. I reached the VIP area. Sloane was sitting there, surrounded by her friends, a circle of women with identical hair and identical smiles. Grant was standing behind her. I moved to set the tray down on the low table. As I leaned forward, shifting my weight to stabilize myself, I saw Sloane's foot move. It wasn't a kick. It was subtle. She shifted her heel just enough to catch the toe of my walking boot. It was a small motion, but when you are balancing on a reconstructed ankle, small motions have massive consequences. My foot caught. My center of gravity vanished. I didn't fall completely. I managed to catch myself on the edge of the sofa, but the tray tipped. 2 bottles of champagne and 6 crystal flutes slid off the silver surface. The sound of shattering glass was explosive. It cut through the music, through the chatter, through the laughter. Shards of crystal sprayed across the floor. Champagne foamed over the expensive rug and splattered onto the hem of Sloane's white dress. The room went dead silent. I froze. I was gripping the back of the sofa, gasping for breath, the pain in my ankle blinding me. "Oh my God!" Sloane shrieked. She jumped up, looking at her dress. "You ruined it! You clumsy idiot!" Grant stepped forward, his face twisting in disgust. "Jesus. Riley, can you not do one simple thing without a disaster?" I looked up. Hundreds of eyes were on me. I saw pity. I saw amusement. I saw contempt. Dana appeared out of the crowd. She didn't look at my leg. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She looked at the wet spot on the rug. "Riley, honestly," she said, her voice loud enough to carry, "if you were not capable of the job, you should have said so. This is a disgrace. You have ruined the aesthetic of the entire evening. I am sorry." I whispered. I tripped." "You didn't trip," Sloane snapped. "You are just bitter. You did this on purpose to embarrass me." I looked at her. I saw the glint in her eye. She knew. She knew exactly what she had done. "Clean it up," Dana ordered. "Now, before it soaks in." She pointed to the floor. I looked at the shards of glass. I looked at the foaming puddle. I can't kneel," I said softly. "My knee." "Figure it out," Dana hissed. "Do not make a scene. Just clean the mess you made." Slowly, painfully. I lowered myself. I couldn't bend my right ankle, so I had to extend my leg awkwardly to the side. I got down on my hands and knees in the middle of the ballroom. I picked up the pieces of glass. One by one, the sharp edges bit into my fingers. The champagne soaked into the knees of my black pants. I felt the heat of their gaze on my back. I was the Cinderella who didn't get the fairy godmother. I was the stain on their perfect picture. When I finished, I struggled to stand. No one offered a hand. Grant actually stepped back to avoid touching me. "Go to the back office," Dana said, not looking at me. "Get your things. Go home. We will mail you a check, minus the cost of the rug cleaning." I turned and limped away. I didn't look back. I didn't want them to see the tears of rage that were finally spilling over. I made it to the hallway. I needed to sit down. I needed to breathe. I saw a door slightly ajar. It was the manager's office, but I knew my father had been using it as a temporary headquarters for the event. I had seen him go in and out earlier. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. It was quiet. I collapsed onto a chair, burying my face in my hands. I sat there for 5 minutes, just breathing, trying to keep the sob in my chest from escaping. I hate them. I whispered to the empty room. I hate them. I wiped my face with the rough sleeve of my uniform. I needed to get my purse and leave. My purse was in the employee locker room, but as I stood up, my eyes caught something on the desk. It was a leather portfolio. My father's portfolio, the one he carried everywhere. It was open. He must have been showing something to an investor earlier. I don't know why I looked. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the universe finally deciding to throw me a bone. I walked over to the desk. On top of the stack of papers was a loan agreement. It was thick, bound with a heavy staple. The header read, Maritime Financing Solutions. It was the loan for the boat, or the timeshare, or whatever legacy item they were buying this week. My eyes scanned the page. Principal borrower, Gordon Walker. Co-borrower, Dana Walker. I was about to turn away, disgusted by their spending, when my eye caught the bottom of the page. There was a section titled Guarantor/Collateral Assignment, and there, typed in clear, black letters, was a name, Riley A. Walker. I froze. I leaned closer. I braced my hands on the desk to support my weight. Under my name, there was a signature. It was a loop, a slant. It looked like my signature, but I had never signed this. I looked at the date. October 14th. I closed my eyes. October 14th. I knew exactly where I was on October 14th. I was in a hospital bed, drifting in and out of consciousness on high-dose painkillers. 2 days after my surgery, I was physically incapable of holding a pen, let alone driving to a notary's office to sign a loan guarantee for $300,000. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. It wasn't the fast, panicked beat of anxiety. It was the slow, heavy thud of realization. They didn't just cut my insurance. They didn't just abandon me. They needed me. They needed my credit history. They needed my clean record. They had maxed out their own leverage. So they had stolen mine. They had used my name to secure the debt for the very lifestyle they excluded me from. If they defaulted on this loan, and knowing my father's history, the bank wouldn't come for them. The bank would come for me. They would take everything I ever built. They would garnish wages I didn't even earn yet. They had handcuffed me to their sinking ship without me even knowing. I reached for the phone in my pocket. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from fury. I took a picture of the document. Then I turned the page. I took a picture of the notary stamp. Patricia Lewis. I knew that name. She was one of Dana's bridge club friends. I took pictures of everything. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly stepped back from the desk. I shoved my phone into my pocket. The door opened. It was Gordon. He stopped when he saw me. He looked annoyed. "What are you doing in here?" "Riley?" he asked. "Dana said you were leaving. I was just getting a tissue," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was too calm. It was the voice of someone who holds a knife behind their back. "Well, hurry up," he grunted. Walking over to the desk, he closed the portfolio without looking at it. "We have guests to entertain." He looked at me. "You look terrible. By the way, try to use the back exit. We don't want people asking questions." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me. I looked at the man who had forged my signature while I lay bleeding in a hospital bed. "I won't let them ask questions." "Dad," I said. "Good," he said, dismissing me. I walked out. I walked down the hallway. I walked past the kitchen where the servers were laughing. I walked out the back door into the cool night air. I limped to Noah's truck. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the dark windshield. I thought about the champagne on the floor. I thought about Sloane's smirk. I thought about the $3,500 they refused to pay. And then I looked at the photo on my phone. Guarantor, Riley A. Walker. I started the truck. I wasn't sad anymore. The crying part of me had died on that ballroom floor. This wasn't a family dispute. This wasn't a drama about feelings or apologies, or being the black sheep. This was fraud. This was a felony. This was paper, and paper can be burned. Or, if you use it right, it can be a blade. I put the truck in gear. I am not going home to cry. I thought, I am going to find a lawyer. The drive back to our apartment that night was performed in a silence so heavy it felt like a third passenger. I did not speed. I did not drive erratically. I adhered to every traffic law with the precision of a machine, because I knew that from this moment forward, I could not afford a single mistake. One speeding ticket, one slip-up, one moment of carelessness could give them an opening to paint me as unstable, and I needed to be the most stable person in the room. When I walked into the apartment, Noah was sitting at the table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He looked up, expecting to see tears or exhaustion. Instead, he saw me place my phone on the table with a deliberate, quiet click. "Do you have a printer?" I asked. He blinked, confused by the shift in my demeanor. "Yeah, the old inkjet in the closet. It jams. But it works. Why?" "Plug it in," I said. "I need to print everything." I spent the next 3 hours doing what I should have done 3 years ago. I did not hack into any databases. I did not guess passwords. I simply went to the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and requested my free annual credit reports. It is a right every citizen has, yet so few of us use it until we are trying to buy a house or a car. I answered the security questions. Which of the following addresses have you lived at? What is your monthly payment on your Subaru? When the file for Equifax finally loaded on the slow internet connection, I scrolled past the student loans I had paid off years ago. I scrolled past the credit card I kept for emergencies, and there it was, under the section labeled Installment Loans and Mortgages. There was a line item that made my breath hitch in my throat. Lender, Maritime Luxury Asset Financing. Original balance, $325,000. Date opened, October 14th. 3 years ago. Status, current/60-day delinquency. Notice sent. I stared at the screen. The delinquency notice. That explained the desperation. That explained why they were hosting a gala to raise funds. They were 2 months behind on a boat they could not afford, and my name was attached to the anchor. I clicked on the details. The correspondence address for the loan was not my apartment. It was not even a P.O. box. It was listed as 12 Oak Ridge Drive, my parents' house. They had set it up so that every bill, every warning, every statement went directly to them. I was the co-signer who was never meant to know she was co-signing. I printed it all. The printer whirred and groaned, spitting out page after page of evidence. I organized them into piles. The credit report, the photos I had taken of the physical contract in the office, and my hospital discharge summary, which I dug out of an old filing box under my bed. The next morning, Noah and I sat in the waiting room of Marla Keene, an attorney recommended by a woman at the rehab center who had sued a contractor for a botched ramp installation. Marla's office was not in a glass skyscraper downtown. It was in a brick strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a donut shop. The carpet was worn, and the air smelled of stale coffee and old paper. But I liked it. It felt real. It felt like a place where fights were won, not where deals were made over scotch. Marla was a woman in her 50s with short, steel-gray hair and glasses that hung around her neck on a beaded chain. She did not offer us tea. She gestured to the chairs and opened the folder I had prepared. She read in silence for 10 minutes. The only sound was the scratching of her pen as she made notes and the occasional hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Finally, she looked up over her reading glasses. "You understand what this is, don't you?" Marla asked. Her voice was gravelly, the voice of a woman who had seen every variety of human greed. "It is fraud," Noah said, his voice tight. "It is sophisticated fraud," Marla corrected. She tapped the photo of the loan document. "Look at the date, October 14th. Where were you on October 14th? "I was in Riverview Hospital." I said, "I had surgery on the 12th. On the 14th, I was still on a morphine drip. I could barely remember my own name, let alone read a 50-page loan agreement. Exactly, Marla said. She pulled out a legal pad. This is what we call a physical impossibility. You cannot be in a post-op recovery room and a notary's office at the same time. The signature is a forgery. A good one, probably traced from an old birthday card or a check you wrote them years ago. But a forgery nonetheless. She leaned back, steepling her fingers. But here's the part that makes this interesting. And by interesting, I mean predatory. She looked at me with a sharp, assessing gaze. Why did they cut your insurance? Riley? To save money, I said. They said the premiums were too high and they needed cash for my sister's career. Marla shook her head. No, that is the story they told you. But look at the timeline. They applied for this loan in September. The approval process for a luxury asset like this takes weeks. The bank would have run a debt-to-income ratio check on all guarantors. She pointed to the papers. If you had health insurance, and if you had undergone a major surgery that was billed to that insurance, there would be a record of a deductible. There might be copays. There might be a temporary dip in your financial stability rating. But more importantly, if they had kept you on the policy, the premiums would have been a monthly liability on their own debt assessment. She paused to let it sink in. They removed you from the insurance to clean up the balance sheet. She said, they needed your credit profile to look spotless. They needed you to have 0 monthly obligations so that the bank would view you as a prime guarantor. They didn't cut you off because they were broke. Riley. They cut you off because they needed you to look rich on paper so they could use you as a mule for this debt. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was so much worse than simple neglect. It was financial engineering. They had calculated the exact moment to sever my support system to maximize their borrowing power. My pain, my broken leg, my potential disability. It was all just collateral damage in a spreadsheet. Noah stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I am going to the police, he said. He was shaking. I am going to the station right now. This is identity theft. I want them in handcuffs. Sit down. Noah, I said. My voice was calm. He looked at me, incredulous. Riley, they stole your life. They almost crippled you to buy a boat. We are not just going to sit here. Sit down, Marla said, her voice sharp. Your sister is right. If you go to the police now, you know what will happen? They will look at the last name on the contract. They will see it is the same as yours. They will say, this looks like a civil family dispute. They will file a report, and it will sit in a tray for 6 months. Meanwhile, your parents will hire a defense team that costs more than this entire strip mall. They will claim Riley gave verbal consent. They will claim she signed it earlier and simply forgot because of the medication. They will muddy the waters until you drown. Noah sank back into the chair, putting his head in his hands. So what do we do? Let them get away with it? No, Marla said. We do not go for the arrest. Not yet. We go for the asset. She turned the credit report around to face us. They are 60 days past due. That means they are scrambling. They are likely trying to refinance or sell the asset before it gets repossessed. If we file a fraud claim with the bank now, the bank freezes the account. The bank launches an internal investigation, and the bank does not care about family dinners. The bank cares about their $300,000, but I need more. Marla continued, the signature is one thing, but we need to prove the conspiracy. Who notarized this? I pulled up the photo of the notary stamp on my phone. Patricia Lewis, I said. Marla's eyes narrowed. Who is she? She is my mother's bridge partner. I said, I have known her since I was 10. She comes to their Christmas parties. Marla smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. Perfect, she said. A notary is a public officer. If she notarized a signature without the signatory present, she committed a felony. And unlike your parents, she probably does not have a reason to lie for them if her own license and freedom are on the line. If we squeeze her, she breaks. And when she breaks, she gives us your parents. She looked at me. Here's the strategy. Riley, we do not sue them yet. We do not scream at them. We collect. I want you to find every piece of paper that links you to them financially. Did you pay them for the insurance they canceled? Yes, I said. I wrote them a check every month. Find the canceled checks, Marla ordered. Prove that you paid for a service they did not provide. That establishes a pattern of financial abuse. Find emails, find texts, anything where they mention the boat, the loan, or money problems. I nodded. I can do that. And one more thing, Marla said, closing the folder. You need to be quiet. You cannot tell them you know. You cannot hint at it. If they know you are coming, they will destroy evidence. They will coerce Patricia Lewis. You have to let them think you are still the pathetic, broken daughter who cleans up their champagne spills. Can you do that? I thought about the night before. I thought about the way Grant had looked at me. I thought about the $3,500. I can do it, I said. We left the office an hour later. The sun was shining, bright and offensive, on the asphalt of the parking lot. Noah walked beside me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. I hate this, he said. I hate that we have to play a game. I just want to hurt them. This isn't a game. Noah, I said, unlocking the truck. It is a foreclosure. We spent the next 3 days turning our apartment into a war room. We didn't have a whiteboard, so we taped pieces of paper to the back of the front door. I dug through old boxes I had packed when I moved out of my parents' house years ago. I found the carbon copies of the checks I had written to Gordon Walker for insurance premium. I lined them up. January, February, March, all the way to September of that year. I logged into my bank account and printed the images of the cashed checks. On the back of the September check, the one for the month they cut me off, my father's handwriting was clear. For deposit only. He had cashed my check for the insurance premium 3 days after he had removed me from the policy. He didn't just stop paying for me. He stole the money I gave him to pay for myself. That is theft, Noah said, staring at the paper taped to the door. That is straight-up theft. It is evidence, I corrected. Then I went through my old text messages. I scrolled back 3 years. It was painful. Reading the messages from before the accident was like looking at a ghost. I sounded so hopeful. I sounded so eager to please them. Mom, I got the promotion. That's nice, dear. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? I found a text from my father. Dated 2 weeks before the surgery. Riley, we need to verify your social security number for the accountant. Some tax thing. I had sent it to him. I had handed them the keys to my identity because I trusted them. I took a screenshot. We had the timeline. We had the motive. We had the method. On the 4th day, I called Marla. We have everything. I said, good, she replied. I am drafting the affidavit for the bank. And I am sending a private investigator to have a chat with Patricia Lewis. We are not going to serve her yet. We are just going to let her know that we know. Fear is a powerful motivator. I hung up the phone. I looked at Noah. He was cleaning his new tools, the ones I had bought him with the first profit from our meal prep business. He was oiling a chisel, the motion rhythmic and soothing. He looked up at me. Are we ready? Not quite, I said. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city. Somewhere out there. My parents were likely planning their next party. They were probably arguing about appetizers, completely unaware that the ground beneath them was no longer solid. They call this debt a legacy. Noah, I said softly, they think a legacy is what you leave behind in a will. I turned to him. I am going to teach them a new definition. A legacy is what you build with your own hands. And right now, I am building a cage. Noah stood up. He walked over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. They aren't going to know what hit them, he said. No, I agreed. They won't. Because they don't speak our language anymore. They speak money. They speak status. I tapped the stack of papers on the table. The credit report. The forged signature. The stolen insurance premiums. But from now on, I said, we are going to speak to them in the only language they can't ignore. We are going to speak in paper, and paper cuts deep. The legal strategy was in place. But lawyers cost money. Marla Keene was generous with her time. But filing fees, private investigators, and the eventual court costs were not free. We needed capital. And more importantly, I needed an identity that had nothing to do with the Walker name. I could not go back to the restaurant industry. I was blacklisted. The story of the clumsy sous chef who ruined a high society gala had circulated with the speed of gossip in a small town. My phone was not ringing. So, I stopped waiting for it to ring. I looked at the city of Charlotte. It is a banking hub. Yes, but it is also a city of logistics, healthcare, and manufacturing. There were thousands of people working while the rest of the world slept. Nurses at the trauma center where I had been treated, police officers on the beat, factory workers on the line. They were eating vending machine crackers and greasy fast food because at 3 a.m, those were the only options. I saw a market. We are not opening a restaurant. I told Noah one Tuesday night, we are opening a lifeline. We converted our tiny apartment kitchen into a commercial prep station. It was tight. We had to move the sofa into the bedroom just to have space for the cooling racks. I spent the last of my savings on a high-grade vacuum sealer and thermal delivery bags. We called it the Night Shift. There was no face on the logo. Just a simple, stylized owl and a moon. I did not use my name. On the website and the app, the chef was listed simply as Chef R. I did not want pity orders. I did not want my mother's friends ordering a salad just to sneer at the packaging. I wanted customers who ordered because they were hungry and the food was good. The menu was simple: high protein, complex carbohydrates, comfort food that did not make you crash an hour later, slow braised beef with root vegetables, spicy chicken bowls with quinoa and roasted corn, things that tasted like a home-cooked meal you missed because you were working a double shift. Noah was the operations manager. He traded his carpentry belt for a delivery map. We fixed up his truck, scrubbing the bed clean and installing a secure, insulated box for the orders. The first week was brutal. We launched on a Monday. We had printed flyers and Noah had taped them up in break rooms at the hospital and the police precinct, sneaking in during shift changes. Monday night, we sat by the laptop. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic. The clock ticked past midnight. One order came in. It was for a single turkey chili bowl. Gross revenue, $12. Noah drove 20 minutes to deliver it to a security guard at a warehouse. He came back looking defeated. We spent more on gas than we made, he said, slumping into a chair. It takes time, I said, though my stomach was churning. Tuesday was 2 orders. Wednesday was 0. By Friday, I was staring at a pot of unsold beef stew, calculating how many days we could survive on ramen before we couldn't pay the electric bill. My leg was aching from standing on the tile floor for 6 hours prepping food that no one wanted. The doubt crept in. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was just a clumsy girl with a bad leg and big dreams. Then came Saturday. I was about to shut down the laptop when a notification pinged. Then another. Then 3 in a row. I clicked open the browser. A local paramedic, a guy with a modest following who reviewed late-night eats for insomniacs, had posted a video. He was sitting in the back of an ambulance, holding one of our bowls. Listen to me, he told the camera. Steam rising from the fork. I have been eating gas station hot dogs for 5 years. This is actual food. This tastes like my grandmother came back from the grave and decided to cook for the graveyard shift. If you are awake and you are hungry, hit up the night shift. Chef R is a magician. The video had 4,000 views, then 10,000. The printer started to spit out tickets. Noah, I shouted, fire up the truck. That night, we sold out in 2 hours. We ran out of containers. We ran out of beef. Noah was driving like a rally racer, texting me updates. Drop off at Mercy General complete, heading to the South Precinct. By the next week, we were doing 50 orders a night. By the end of the month, we were doing 100. The apartment became a factory. The smell of cooking was permanent. We slept in shifts. I cooked from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. Noah delivered from 10 at night until 4 in the morning. Then we switched. But as the money started to flow, I made a decision that confused Noah. We need to file for an LLC. I said, we need a commercial kitchen lease. We need health inspections. We need to pay every cent of sales tax, payroll tax, and income tax. Noah looked at the spreadsheet. That is going to eat 40% of our profit. We are small. We can fly under the radar for a while. Cash is king. No, I said firmly. We do not fly under the radar. I pinned the tax forms to the wall next to our foreclosure plan. Mom and Dad fly under the radar. Noah. They hide assets. They forge signatures. They cheat. And that is why we are going to catch them. If we want to take them down, our hands have to be clean. I want our books to be so perfect that the IRS could frame them. If they ever try to call me a fraud, I want to be able to drown them in receipts. So we did it the hard way. We paid the fees. We rented a shared commercial kitchen space during the off hours from midnight to 6 in the morning, which was cheaper and fit our schedule perfectly. We got certified. We were legitimate. 3 months into the business, we were tired, but we were solvent, for the first time in years. I was not counting pennies at the grocery store. One morning, after a particularly grueling shift, Noah came home. He looked wrecked. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his hands. His knuckles were swollen. I walked into my room and pulled a box from under the bed. I had been saving for this since the first profitable week. I walked back out and placed it on his lap. "What is this?" he asked, eyeing the heavy cardboard. "Open it," I said. He tore the tape. Inside was a Lie-Nielsen block plane. It was bronze and iron, heavy and precise. It was the Rolls-Royce of woodworking tools. It was better than the one he had pawned. Underneath it was a catalog for a full workshop setup. Saws, chisels, clamps. I put a check on top of the catalog. It was for $5,000. "Riley," he whispered, staring at the check. "We need this for the business. We need this for the lawyer. The lawyer is paid for the month," I said, "and the business is fine." I sat down next to him. "You sold your future to buy me a leg. Noah, did you really think I was going to let you be a delivery driver forever?" He picked up the plane, his hands, rough and scarred, wrapped around the handle naturally. He closed his eyes. I saw his throat work as he swallowed back tears. "You are the operations manager," I said. "But that is the night job. During the day, you are a craftsman. You are going to build furniture again. And this time, you are going to sell it to people who appreciate it, not to people like Mom and Dad who just want a prop for a photo." He looked at me. "Thank you." Don't thank me," I said. "We are just balancing the ledger." But I was not just fixing Noah. I was fixing myself. I took a portion of our profits and did something selfish. I did not buy clothes. I did not buy a car. I hired a specialist. Doctor. Aris was a physical therapist who worked with athletes. He was expensive. He did not accept insurance, which was fine, because I did not trust insurance companies anymore. I went to his clinic 3 times a week. It was brutal. He did not pamper me. He put me on treadmills with sensors. He made me balance on unstable surfaces until my muscles screamed. "You are favoring the right side," he told me during one session, watching my gait analysis on a screen. "You are guarding the injury. The bone is healed. Riley, the hardware held. The only thing making you limp now is habit and fear. You have to trust the titanium. Trust the titanium." It became my mantra. When I walked, I forced my heel to strike the ground hard. I forced my knee to bend. I broke the scar tissue in my mind. Pain is information. "Doctor," Aris said, "it is not a stop sign, week by week." The hitch in my step faded. I recorded myself walking down the hallway of the apartment. In the first video, I looked like a wounded bird. By month 4, I looked like a soldier. By month 6, I looked like a woman who could walk into a boardroom and command attention. I was preparing. I knew the timeline Marla had set. We were gathering the string, looping it slowly around my parents' ankles. We kept tabs on them. It wasn't hard. They lived their lives in public. Sloane posted photos of her new studio, a renovated guest house on my parents' property. The caption read, "Invest in yourself." I knew, thanks to Marla's PI, that the renovation was funded by a second mortgage on the lake house. Gordon posted about his business trips to Miami. Marla's contacts confirmed he was meeting with high-risk lenders, trying to bridge the gap on the boat loan that was now 90 days delinquent. They were drowning, and they were responding to the water rising by throwing bigger parties. One evening, about 8 months after the catering disaster, I was in the commercial kitchen. The staff, we had 3 employees now, were packing orders. The air was filled with the smell of roasted garlic and success. I checked my email on my phone. There was a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, Partnership Inquiry / Night Shift Expansion. I opened it. Dear Chef R., my name is David Thorne. I represent a venture group focused on scalable food logistics. We have been ordering your food for our late-night coding sessions for 2 months. We are impressed, not just by the product, but by the operational efficiency. We believe the night shift has franchise potential. We would like to discuss an initial seed investment to expand your operations to Raleigh and Durham. Let's talk numbers. I stared at the screen. A seed investment, expansion, franchise. This was not just a job anymore. This was an empire. I looked across the kitchen. Noah was there. Not driving tonight, but showing a new driver how to pack the thermal bags efficiently. He looked healthy. He was smiling. He had sawdust in his hair from his day in the workshop. I walked over to him and held up the phone. He read the email. His eyes went wide. Is this real? He asked. It is real, I said. He grinned. So, are we going to be rich? I looked at the email again. Then I looked at the calendar on the wall. The foreclosure notice Marla had drafted was ready to be filed. The timing was aligning with terrifying precision. We are going to be powerful. Noah, I said. I tapped the screen. Reply to them. I said, tell them we are interested, but tell them the price just went up. I walked back to my station. I did not limp. My stride was long and even. The boot was gone. The cane was gone. I picked up my knife. It was sharp. Phase 1 is done. I thought, we survived. We built. Now comes Phase 2. Now we take the house. The envelope that arrived at my apartment on a rainy Tuesday morning looked innocuous. It was standard cream-colored stationery with a return address from a probate law firm in Savannah, Georgia. I almost tossed it in the recycling bin, assuming it was a solicitation or a mistake, but Marla Keene, my attorney, had taught me to read everything. I opened it at the kitchen table while Noah was servicing the delivery truck's alternator. Inside was a notification regarding the estate of a great-aunt Clara, a woman I had met exactly twice in my life. She had passed away 6 months ago, and through a convoluted twist of survivorship clauses and family estrangements, a specific asset had trickled down the family tree until it landed. Improbably, in my lap, it was a deed. I owned a parcel of land. At first glance, it looked like a windfall. The description read, 2.5 acres of marshfront property, intracoastal waterway access. I felt a spark of excitement. 2.5 acres on the water? That could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could be the capital injection the night shift needed to expand without taking outside investors. I called Marla immediately. We met an hour later. She read the deed. Then she read the 3 pages of attached documents that I had skimmed over. Her expression did not lighten. It grew grim. Riley, do not pop the champagne, Marla said, taking off her glasses. This is not a gift. This is a grenade. What do you mean? I asked. It is waterfront property. It is a designated wetland with a failing retaining wall, she corrected, tapping a document from the Army Corps of Engineers. Look at this addendum. The previous owner, your aunt, was served with a remediation order 4 months before she died. The bulkhead that prevents the land from sliding into the Sound has collapsed. Because of the environmental impact on the marsh, the county has mandated an immediate, specialized reconstruction. She turned the page to the estimate. The cost to bring the land into compliance is $185,000. Marla read, and because it is a hazardous erosion zone, the fines for non-compliance start at $500 a day, effective 30 days from the transfer of title. I stared at the paper. $185,000. I didn't have that, even with the business doing well. That was a fortune. So, I am bankrupt? I asked. If you keep it, yes, Marla said. You have two choices. You can disclaim the inheritance, in which case it goes to the state, or— She paused, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. Or you sell it, she finished. Who would buy a piece of land that comes with a nearly $200,000 repair bill? I asked. Someone who does not read the fine print, Marla said softly. Or someone who is so arrogant they believe they can bully the county into waiving the regulations. Someone who sees waterfront and sees dollar signs, but ignores the structural report because they think they know better than the engineers. I looked at Marla. We were both thinking of the same person, Grant. My brother-in-law prided himself on being a real estate visionary. He was always bragging about flipping properties, about seeing value where others saw nothing. He was also desperate. I knew from the credit reports that he and Sloan were leveraging everything they had to keep up appearances. A prime waterfront lot, acquired for pennies, would look incredible on their balance sheet. It would give them an asset to borrow against, at least until the assessment bill arrived. How do we do this legally? I asked. Full disclosure, Marla said. We provide a disclosure packet. We include the engineering report. We include the county notice. We bury nothing. We put it all in a thick stack of paper, if they choose not to read it, or if they choose to believe the repair is cheaper than it really is. That is, as they say, the cost of doing business. I nodded. I knew exactly how to play this. I did not call them. That would have looked suspicious. Instead, I let the information bleed out into the water like chum. I contacted a real estate agent I knew. Grant followed on social media. I asked for a consultation about a property I had inherited but couldn't afford to keep. I mentioned the location. I mentioned I was overwhelmed and just wanted to get rid of it for quick cash. It took less than 48 hours. My phone rang on a Thursday afternoon. It was Sloan. Her voice was dripping with synthetic sweetness, a tone she usually reserved for her Instagram stories. Riley, we heard the news, she chirped. Aunt Clara left you the marsh lot? That is so sweet. Yeah, I said, making my voice sound tired and small. It is a lot, honestly. I don't know what to do with it. The taxes, the paperwork. I am just drowning. Sloan, I was thinking of just letting the state take it. Oh, don't be silly, she exclaimed. You can't let family land go to the government. That is sinful. Look, Grant and I were talking. We know you are struggling. We know you are probably hard up for cash with, your situation. We want to help. Help? I asked. We could take it off your hands, she said. Grant is willing to buy it from you. We would keep it in the family. We would handle all the headaches. I paused. I let the silence stretch just long enough to sound hesitant. I don't know. Sloan, there's a lot of maintenance involved. There are some notices from the county. Oh, Grant handles the county all the time. She dismissed. He knows the zoning board guys. He can smooth all that out. Don't worry your pretty little head about the technical stuff. We met the next day at a coffee shop downtown. They didn't invite me to their house. They didn't want me near their sanctuary. Grant was wearing a suit that was too tight in the shoulders. He had a folder in front of him. He looked energized. He looked like a wolf who had found a lamb with a broken leg. So, Riley, he said, flashing a blinding white smile. Here's the deal. We assess the comps. It is raw land. It needs work. But because we love you, and we want to see you have a little nest egg, we are prepared to offer you $5,000 cash. Today, $5,000 for a waterfront lot. It was robbery. If the land didn't have the assessment attached, it would be worth $300,000. He was trying to steal from me. Again. $5,000? I asked, acting unsure. That seems low? Grant sighed, leaning forward like he was explaining gravity to a toddler. Riley, it is a liability. You have to pay closing costs, transfer taxes, title insurance. Frankly, I am doing you a favor. I am taking on a headache. If you list this on the open market, it will sit for years. You will be paying taxes on dirt. Do you have tax money? He glanced at my shoes. Simple sneakers. He didn't know they were $100 running shoes I bought for my rehab. He saw what he wanted to see: poverty. I looked down at the table. "And you will handle the conditions?" I asked. "I have the disclosure packet here." I tapped the thick envelope Marla had prepared. Grant waved a hand dismissively. "I have my own team. Riley, we do our own due diligence. I don't need to read your panic-inducing paperwork. I know what wetlands are. I know how to build a bulkhead for pennies on the dollar. You just sign, take the check, and walk away." He pushed a contract toward me. I looked at it. It was a standard purchase agreement, but he had added a clause in bold print at the bottom. Buyer accepts property as is, whereas buyer acknowledges receipt of all disclosures and assumes all future liabilities, liens, and municipal requirements associated with the parcel. He pointed to it with his expensive pen. "I put this here to protect me. Riley," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "since we are doing this fast, without a long inspection period, I need to make sure you don't come back later asking for more money when I turn this into $1 million estate. Once you sign, it is mine. The profit is mine. The risk is mine. You can't sue me later saying I underpaid you. Understand?" He thought he was trapping me. He thought he was locking me out of the future profits. He was actually locking himself into the cage. I looked at the check for $5,000 sitting on top of the paper. I looked at Sloane. She was checking her reflection in her phone screen. Bored. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. My heart did not race. I felt a profound, icy calm. "Okay," I said. "If you are sure, I am very sure," Grant said, grinning. I signed. I pushed the paper back to him. He snatched it up like a starving dog grabbing a bone. "Done," he said. He handed me the check. "Don't spend it all in one place. Riley, maybe buy yourself some new clothes." I took the check. "Thank you. Grant, you have no idea how much this helps." I stood up to leave. "Wait," Sloane said. "Just so you know, we are going to build a summer cottage there. We'll invite you for a barbecue once it is done. If you can make it." I smiled at her. "I doubt you will be building anything there for a long time." "Sloane. But thank you." I walked out of the coffee shop. I walked to the bank across the street and deposited the check. Then I walked to the parking lot where Noah was waiting in the truck. "Did they sign?" Noah asked. "They signed." I said. He looked at me. He looked worried. Isn't this wrong?" he asked. "We just handed them a ticking time bomb." I looked out the window. I watched Grant and Sloane walking to their luxury SUV. Grant was high-fiving her. They were celebrating the heist. They thought they had just swindled their disabled sister out of a fortune. They wanted the land. "Noah," I said, "they wanted the status of owning waterfront property. They wanted it so bad they refused to read the warnings. I didn't lie to them. I offered them the report. Grant refused to look at it. But the bill," Noah said, "it is $185,000. I turned to him. "They charged me $3,500 for a life without pain. Noah, they charged me my future. Now, they are just paying the market rate for their arrogance." I buckled my seatbelt. "Besides," I said, "the county moves fast. They will know by Tuesday." It took until Wednesday. I was in the kitchen, testing a new recipe for spicy lentil soup, when my phone blew up. 7 missed calls from Grant, 5 from Sloane, 3 from my father. I didn't answer. I let them go to voicemail. I listened to the first one from Grant. "Riley, what the hell is this? I just got a certified letter from the Department of Environmental Quality. They are saying I owe an immediate remediation bond of $185,000, or they are placing a lien on my primary assets. You knew about this. You scammed us." I deleted the message. I listened to the second one. "Call me back. I am going to sue you. I am going to drag you to court. You cannot do this to family." I smiled. I called Marla. "They are threatening to sue." I said, "Let them try." Marla laughed. Her laugh was a dry, rasping sound. Grant signed an as-is clause that specifically acknowledged the assumption of all municipal liabilities. He drafted the clause himself to screw you out, potential appreciation. He literally signed a document saying, I take the risk. No judge in this state will hear his case. He is a sophisticated investor buying from a distressed relative. He bought the farm. Riley? Now he has to shovel the manure. The trap had snapped shut. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about the pressure. The $185,000 demand from the county hit them at the worst possible moment. They were already behind on the boat loan. Now, with a new massive liability on their record, their credit rating would plummet. They couldn't refinance. They couldn't borrow. They were liquidating. I saw the listing a few days later. My father put his vintage Porsche up for sale. Sloan posted that she was downsizing her closet, selling designer bags for quick cash. But it wasn't enough. I knew the numbers. They were in a hole so deep they couldn't climb out. And that was when they announced the gala. It was their desperate Hail Mary, the Walker family annual legacy night. The invitation was posted on every social media channel. Tickets were $500 a plate. They were billing it as a charity event for underprivileged youth in the arts. But I knew better. I looked up the charity registration. It was a shell. The administrative fees would eat up 90% of the donations. They were throwing a party to solicit donations from their rich friends to pay off their debts. They were going to stand on a stage, talk about generosity, and use the money to save their own skins. I looked at the invitation on my laptop screen. The date was 2 weeks away. Location: the Grand Ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. Noah walked up behind me. He looked at the screen. "They are really doing it," he said. "They are going to pretend everything is fine." "They have to," I said. "If they admit they are broke, the house of cards falls. They need the appearance of wealth to attract the money to save the wealth. It is a Ponzi scheme of reputation." Noah looked at me. "So, what do we do? Do we wait for the bank to foreclose?" "No," I said. I stood up. I walked to the closet and pulled out a garment bag. I had bought it 3 days ago. Inside was a dress. It was not black. It was not a server's uniform. It was red, deep, blood red. It was a dress that screamed power. And next to it was a pair of stilettos, 3-inch heels. I had been practicing. My ankle was steel. My balance was perfect. "We are not waiting for the bank," I said. I turned to Noah. "Marla has the foreclosure papers ready. She bought the debt on the boat loan yesterday. A shell company we set up now owns the note. We are the bank." Noah. His eyes widened. "We own their debt? We own the boat loan," I said. "And because of the cross-collateralization clause they signed to get that boat, if they default on the boat, we can move on the house." I zipped the garment bag closed. They invited the whole city to see their legacy. I said, I looked at my brother. "I think we should go. I think it is time the guests met the real investors." The countdown to the end of the Walker family dynasty did not begin with a shout. It began with the rhythmic, hollow sound of a heel striking a hardwood floor. Click, step, click, step. I was in my apartment, engaging in a ritual that looked like vanity but felt like combat training for the last 3 weeks, every night after the kitchen closed. I cleared the living room furniture. I strapped on a pair of 3-inch stilettos. They were not sensible shoes. They were architectural marvels of black leather and steel, designed to lengthen the leg and command attention. 6 months ago, a doctor had told me I would be lucky to walk on flat ground without a cane. Now, I was learning to turn a pivot in heels that would make a runway model stumble. Doctor. Aris had called it proprioceptive recalibration. I called it weaponizing my recovery. The pain was still there, a ghost haunting the titanium screws in my ankle. But I had learned to negotiate with it. I treated the pain like a disgruntled employee. I acknowledged it, and then I ordered it to get back to work. Noah watched me from the kitchen doorway. He was holding a mug of tea, leaning against the doorframe in a way that used to look defeated, but now looked relaxed. "You are walking faster than you used to," he observed. "Even before the accident, I am not walking." "Noah," I said, reaching the end of the room and turning sharply, "I am marching." The date was set, November 12th. The invitation had been circulating for weeks, embossed on heavy cardstock with gold foil lettering. "The Walker family invites you to Legacy Night. a gala for the arts and the future. Hosted at the Sovereign Hotel, Grand Ballroom. It was a masterclass in deception. To the outside world, it was a philanthropic event. To me, it was a desperate fundraising drive disguised as a party. My parents were bleeding cash. The boat loan was delinquent. The marshland property Grant had foolishly bought from me was racking up $500 a day in fines. They needed investors. They needed to project an image of untouchable wealth so they could secure new loans to pay off the old ones. They were building a stage to hide the fact that the theater was burning down. 2 days before the event, I sat in Marla Keene's office. The air conditioner rattled, battling the unseasonable heat. On her desk sat a single, thin folder. It looked insignificant compared to the mountains of paper we had generated over the last few months. "Is it done?" I asked. Marla nodded. She looked like a cat that had just eaten a particularly slow canary. "It is done," she said. "The assignment of debt was finalized this morning. The bank was all too happy to offload a non-performing asset. They didn't care who bought the note, as long as they got 60 cents on the dollar." She slid the folder across the desk. "Congratulations, Riley. You are now the primary creditor for Maritime Financing Solutions. You own the note on the boat." I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until I found the transfer clause. The entity listed as the new lien holder was Phoenix Limited, a shell company Marla had set up, but the signature at the bottom of the controlling agreement was mine. "And the cross-collateralization?" I asked. Marla tapped paragraph 4. "That is the kill shot. Your father, in his infinite wisdom and arrogance, used the equity in the primary residence, 12 Oak Ridge Drive, to secure the boat loan because his liquidity was low at the time. He bet the house on the boat." She leaned back. "Since the boat loan is 90 days past due, and since you now own the loan, you have the right to accelerate the debt. You can demand full payment of the principal, $325,000, immediately. If they cannot pay, you have the legal right to initiate foreclosure proceedings on the collateral." "Which is the house?" I said. "The house," Marla confirmed. "The house they are currently decorating for the after-party." I closed the folder. It felt cold under my fingers. This wasn't just justice. This was an eviction notice for my childhood trauma. I stood up. "Thank you, Marla." She took off her glasses. "Be careful. Riley, when you corner a narcissist, they don't cry. They attack. Make sure when you walk into that room, you are ready for the backlash." I looked at my shoes. I looked at the folder. "I am not going there to argue. Marla," I said, "I am going there to collect." The day of the gala arrived with a gray, overcast sky. The tension in our apartment was palpable, but it wasn't fear. It was the focused energy of a backstage crew 5 minutes before the curtain rises. Noah had spent the morning at his new workshop. He wasn't hiding anymore. He had 3 custom commission pieces finishing up. Dining tables for a boutique hotel downtown. He had employees. He had a bank account that was healthy. But to our parents, he was still just the failure with the pickup truck. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dana. "Riley, we need you at the hotel by 4:30. Use the service elevator in the loading dock. Do not come through the lobby. We need help with the silent auction setup. And please, wear pants, wide leg ones. Nobody wants to see that boot or the scars. We are selling an image of perfection tonight." I read the text out loud to Noah. He was polishing his shoes. Real leather Oxfords, not work boots. "Wear pants," he repeated, shaking his head. "She still thinks you are wearing the boot. She thinks I am still the girl who cleans up her spills." I said. I typed my reply. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her I wasn't coming to work. I didn't tell her I wasn't wearing pants. "I will be there." I typed, it was the truth. Just not the version of the truth she expected. At 6 o'clock, the transformation began. I showered and sat at my vanity. I applied makeup with surgical precision. Sharp contour, dark red lip. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, severe bun. No flyaways, no softness. Then, I opened the garment bag. The dress was a deep, blood-red silk. It was tailored to within an inch of its life. It had a high slit on the right side, the side of my injury. I stepped into it. The silk felt like cool water against my skin. Then came the shoes, the black stilettos. I sat on the edge of the bed and buckled the strap around my right ankle. I traced the line of the scar that ran down my shin. It was white now, a thin line of history. I stood up. I checked my balance. The titanium held. The muscle held. I was 5 feet 9 inches of unadulterated resolve. I walked out into the living room. Noah turned around. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly. It was expensive. We had bought it with the profits from the franchise deal. He looked like the man he was always meant to be. Capable, successful, and imposing. He stared at me. "You look dangerous," he said. "That is the point," I replied. He picked up the folder, the one containing the loan transfer, the forged signature proof, and the photos of the insurance fraud. "Are you ready to burn it down?" he asked. I took a deep breath. I thought about the $3,500. I thought about the way Grant laughed at me in the coffee shop. I thought about my mother's voice telling me to use the service elevator. "I am not burning it down." "Noah," I said, taking the folder, "I am just turning on the lights. We did not take the truck. We hired a car, a black sedan with tinted windows. The ride to the Sovereign Hotel was silent. I watched the city pass by. I saw the restaurant where I used to work, where I was fired for being too slow. I saw the hospital where I had begged for help. We pulled up to the hotel. The valet stand was a flurry of activity. Bentleys and Mercedes lined the curb. Paparazzi were snapping photos of local socialites. The driver moved to open the door, but I stopped him. "Wait," I said. I looked at the text message from Dana one last time. "Use the service elevator." I deleted the thread. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." We stepped out. The air was cool. The red carpet was bright. A few photographers glanced at us, confused. They didn't recognize us. We weren't the Walker children they knew, the disappointment and the cripple. We were strangers who looked like they owned the building. We walked past the check-in desk. The concierge tried to direct us toward the coat check. Noah ignored him. He offered me his arm. I took it. We walked to the main elevators. The gala was on the 20th floor. I pressed the button. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm. Thump, thump. Noah looked at the digital display as the numbers climbed. 10, 15, 18. "Do you think they are expecting us?" he asked quietly. "They are expecting the help." I said, 19. The elevator slowed. I shifted my weight. I felt the floor beneath my heels. It was solid. I was solid. The doors slid open. The noise of the party hit us first. A wall of chatter, clinking glass, and a string quartet playing something polite and Vivaldi-esque. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers dripping with light. Round tables covered in white linen. Huge floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car. And there, in the center of the room, stood my family. Gordon was holding a microphone, beaming at the crowd. Dana was standing next to him in a gold dress, clutching a bouquet of roses. Sloan and Grant were off to the side, accepting congratulations from a group of bankers. Gordon was mid-speech. "And that is why family is the cornerstone of everything we do," he boomed, his voice amplified by the speakers. "We build not for ourselves, but for the generations to come. We sacrifice so they can soar." I stepped out of the elevator. I did not look for the service entrance. I did not look for a tray to carry. I walked straight onto the marble floor of the foyer that led into the ballroom. Click, the sound was sharp. It cut through the low hum of the conversation near the doors. Click, heads began to turn. A woman in a blue dress near the entrance looked at me, then nudged her husband. Click, I walked with a stride that ate up the distance. Noah was right beside me, his face a mask of stone. We reached the edge of the carpeted dining area. Gordon was still talking. Transparency and integrity are the values the Walker name stands on. I stepped off the marble and onto the hardwood dance floor that ran down the center of the room. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound of my heels echoed in the vast space. Gordon faltered. He saw the movement in the back of the room. He squinted against the spotlight. Dana turned her head. I saw the moment she recognized me. Her eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her throat. She looked at my legs. She looked at the red dress. She looked at the absence of the boot. She looked at the high heels. The room began to quiet down. People sensed the disruption. They followed the gaze of the hosts. 200 people turned to look at the woman in the red dress walking down the center aisle like she was the bride at a funeral. Grant dropped his wine glass. It didn't shatter. It bounced on the carpet, spilling red liquid that looked disturbingly like the dress I was wearing. I didn't stop. I didn't smile. I walked until I was 10 feet from the stage. Gordon's mouth was open. The microphone was picking up his heavy breathing. "Riley?" he whispered. It was an incredulous, fearful sound. I stopped. I stood perfectly still. My weight was evenly distributed. My posture was impeccable. I looked at Dana. I saw the terror in her eyes. She wasn't looking at a daughter. She was looking at a ghost that had come back to life. Taller and stronger than she remembered, I held up the folder. "You told me to come to the back door." "Mother," I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried to the back row. I took a step forward, but I checked the deed. And it turns out, I don't need to use the service entrance. I tossed the folder onto the stage. It landed at Gordon's feet with a heavy slap. "Because I own the building." "Well, not the hotel," I corrected, my voice dropping to a deadly conversational tone. "Just the house you sleep in." I smiled, and it was the only thing in the room colder than the champagne. "Let's talk about your legacy." The silence in the ballroom was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and thick with the tension of 200 held breaths. My father, Gordon, stood frozen on the stage, the microphone still raised halfway to his mouth. His speech about family unity hung in the air like stale smoke. I took another step. My heel struck the floor with a sound that was sharper than a gavel. Dana was the first to move. She did not look at my face. She did not look at my eyes. She stared, with a mixture of horror and offense. At my ankles, she was looking at the absence of the heavy medical boot she had insisted I hide. She was looking at the 3-inch stilettos that proved her narrative of the broken dependent daughter was a lie. I walked until I was standing directly in front of the stage, at the center of the room. The spotlight that was meant for them spilled over onto me, illuminating the red silk of my dress. "Riley?" Gordon hissed, lowering the microphone but forgetting to cover it with his hand. His voice boomed through the speakers, a desperate, angry whisper. "What are you doing? You are supposed to be in the back. You are making a scene. I am not making a scene." "Father," I said, my voice clear and projected, trained by months of shouting orders in a busy kitchen, "I am making a correction." Grant peeled himself away from the group of investors he had been charming. He rushed toward me, his face flushed with the kind of panic that turns into aggression. He tried to make it look like a brotherly embrace, but his hand clamped onto my upper arm with bruising force. "You need to leave," he whispered into my ear, his breath smelling of expensive red wine and fear. "I don't know what medication you are on, but you are embarrassing the family. I will call security and have you dragged out if I have to." I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his face. "I wouldn't do that." "Grant," I said calmly. I reached into the small clutch purse I was carrying. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a single, folded white envelope. I shoved it into his chest. He instinctively let go of my arm to grab it. "That is for you," I said. He looked down at it. It was the official notice from the County Department of Environmental Quality, stamped with a bright red urgent seal. It was the bill for $185,000 in immediate fines for the marshland property he had so arrogantly purchased from me, while he stared at the paper, his face draining of color. I turned back to my parents. They stood on the stage like wax figures melting under the heat. Sloane was behind them, checking her phone, frantically trying to delete the live stream she had started, but it was too late. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. My legs were strong. My balance was perfect. I stopped at the podium. Gordon tried to block me, but I simply placed the thick manila folder I had carried in with me onto the lectern. I opened it. The first page was an enlarged copy of the loan agreement for the boat they were currently 3 months behind on. The second page was the hospital log from Riverview Medical Center. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to the crowd, "I apologize for the interruption. My father was just telling you about the importance of legacy. He was telling you about honesty." I tapped the paper, "but there is a small clerical error I need to address. You see, this loan for $325,000 lists me, Riley Walker, as the guarantor. It was signed on October 14th. 3 years ago." I paused. I let the date hang in the air. On October 14th, I was in a hospital bed, recovering from a surgery my parents refused to pay for. I was heavily sedated. I was unable to hold a pen, yet, miraculously, my signature appears on this document, securing a luxury vessel for the family that told me they couldn't afford to save my leg. A gasp went through the room. It wasn't a theatrical gasp. It was the sound of shock. These were bankers, lawyers, and investors. They understood exactly what I was saying. They understood fraud. Dana stepped forward, her face twisting. "She is lying," she shrieked, her composure shattering. "She is unstable. She has been on painkillers for years. She gave us verbal permission. She is just jealous because she failed at her own life." I didn't argue. I didn't scream back. I simply gestured to the back of the room. The double doors opened. Marla Keene walked in. She wasn't wearing a ball gown. She was wearing a charcoal suit. Flanking her were 2 men in windbreakers that read State Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division, and a woman holding a briefcase whom I recognized as the senior compliance officer from the bank. They walked down the aisle. The sound of their footsteps was different from mine. It was the heavy, flat sound of authority. Gordon looked at Marla. He recognized her. He had received the demand letters. "Mr. Walker," Marla said, her voice cutting through the room without a microphone. "I am Marla Keene, attorney for the primary lien holder. We are here to serve you with a notice of default and immediate acceleration of debt regarding the asset known as the Legacy 2. "We are handling that," Gordon sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. "We are in refinancing talks. This is a private matter." "It is not a private matter when the collateral is fraudulent," Marla said, "and it is certainly not private when the notary who witnessed the signature, Ms. Patricia Lewis, has sworn in a deposition this morning that she was coerced by you and your wife to notarize the document without the signatory present." A scream came from the side of the stage. It was Dana. She had seen the police officers. She realized, finally, that this wasn't a social faux pas. This was an indictment. I turned to Grant. He was still holding the environmental notice, shaking. "And you?" "Grant," I said softly. He looked up at me, his eyes wild. I didn't sign the boat loan," he stammered. "I had nothing to do with that." "No," I agreed. "But you bought the marshland. You insisted on the clause that said you accepted all notices and liabilities. You wanted the profit without the reading." I pointed to the paper in his hand. "The county just condemned the land. Grant, the fines are retroactive. You owe the state $185,000, and since you leveraged your own house to buy it, well, I imagine Sloan is going to be very upset when she finds out she is homeless." Sloan let out a sob, dropping her phone. The room was in chaos. Guests were standing up, grabbing their purses, trying to exit without making eye contact. The illusion of the perfect Walker family had not just cracked, it had exploded. But I wasn't done. I turned back to Gordon. He was slumped against the podium, looking old and defeated. "Who is the lien holder?" he whispered. "Who is trying to take the house? I will pay them. I will find the money. You can't pay them." "Dad," I said, "you don't have any money. That is why we are here." I signaled to Noah. My brother walked up the steps. He looked magnificent in his suit. He stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder. Gordon looked at Noah. He looked confused. "Phoenix Limited," I said, "that is the company that bought your bad debt from the bank this morning." I took a step closer to my father. "We are Phoenix Limited. Dad, Noah and I, We own the note. We own the boat, and because you use this house, the house we grew up in, the house you kicked me out of, as collateral. I leaned in. We own the house. Gordon's knees gave way. He gripped the podium to stop himself from falling. Dana was sobbing into her hands, muttering about her reputation, about her friends, about how I was an ungrateful monster. I looked out at the crowd, or what was left of it. I saw the faces of the people who had looked down on me when I was serving them champagne. I saw the fear in their eyes. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid because they realized that the girl they treated like furniture had just bought the building. I took the microphone from the stand. They call this night Legacy Night, I said into the silence. I turned to Noah. I handed him the microphone. He looked at the crowd. He looked at our parents, who were now being spoken to by the investigators. He looked at me. A real legacy isn't a boat, Noah said, his voice deep and steady. It isn't a watch. It isn't a gala. He pointed at me. A real legacy is the person who sold his tools to save his sister. A real legacy is the sister who learned to walk again just so she could carry her brother across the finish line. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were the keys to the new workshop facility we had just closed on, a massive space where he would build his furniture and where I would run the headquarters of our franchise. He looked at Gordon and Dana. Keep the boat, Noah said. If you can pay the $300,000 by midnight. He dropped the keys on the podium next to the folder. But we are taking our names back. Noah put his arm around my waist. I leaned into him, not because I needed the support, but because I wanted the connection. We turned our backs on them. We walked down the steps of the stage. We walked down the center aisle. To our left, Grant was arguing with a process server. To our right, Dana was being escorted out a side door by the officers to answer some questions regarding identity theft. We didn't look. We walked through the double doors at the back of the ballroom. The air in the hallway was cool and quiet. The noise of the collapsing dynasty faded behind us. We walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors opened, we stepped out into the night. The air smelled of rain and exhaust and freedom. Noah loosened his tie. He looked at me and grinned. Hungry? He asked. Starving, I said. We got into the black car. I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look back at the penthouse where my parents were watching their world dissolve into a sea of legal fees and public humiliation. I looked at my brother. I looked at my legs. I closed my eyes and listened to the engine hum. The debt was paid. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever felt like the underdog in your own family, or if you've ever had to build your own table because they wouldn't give you a seat at theirs, I want to hear from you. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening from, whether you are working the night shift like Riley, or just taking a break in your car. Let's connect, and if you enjoyed seeing the tables turn, please subscribe to the Jane Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this victory with even more people. Stay strong, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is just becoming the person they said you'd never be.